So when you picture the major exports of a nation, your mind usually goes to tangible things,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, physical stuff.
Exactly. You think of like shipping containers stacked high with electronics, or pipelines pumping crude oil, or just massive freighters loaded with grain.
Things you can actually point to.
Right. You can
Yeah.
see it, you can touch it, you can literally count it on a dock.
Huh?
But when you look at a country like Nepal, the primary export for decades hasn't been, a product you can just put in a box.
No, it hasn't. It's been human beings.
Yeah, human beings. And we are talking about physical, backbreaking labor here. Hundreds of thousands of young people crossing borders, venturing into the sweltering heat of the Gulf or, the busy streets of East Asia.
Pouring concrete.
Literally pouring concrete, building the infrastructure of other nations with their own two hands.
It's this profound and highly visible export of human capital. I mean, sweat and muscle leave the country and wire transfers come back.
Right.
But today, we're unpacking a source that completely, upends that entire dynamic.
It really does.
Yeah, we are examining this incredibly comprehensive business plan and manifesto by Paramendra Kumar Bhagat. And it's for a project called Himalayan Compute.
Himalayan Compute. Okay, let's unpack this. Because the scope here is, it's massive.
It's not a small pitch.
No, not at all. When I first read through these documents, I realized this isn't just a pitch deck for a couple of guys in a garage trying to build, a new food delivery app.
Right.
This is a full-blown geopolitical and economic blueprint. The mission here is to trigger what the author calls a generational pivot for Nepal.
A generational pivot. That's the exact phrasing.
Yeah. The goal is to transform a nation that has historically survived by exporting its absolute best human capital into a sovereign, dominant producer of global AI infrastructure.
Which is a wild shift to think about.
It's crazy. It's about building the roads and bridges of the 21st century digital economy, but right there in the Himalayas.
And the sheer scale of that ambition, it really forces us to look at the macroeconomic reality of Nepal. And honestly, a lot of developing nations through a completely different lens.
For sure.
The author starts with a pretty stark diagnosis of the current situation. He describes it as this tragic imbalance.
Tragic imbalance.
Right, because Nepal exports its most ambitious, energetic people and then turns around and imports its future back at a premium.
That specific phrase, exporting people and importing the future, it paints such a vivid and frankly heartbreaking picture, don't you think?
It's incredibly bleak when you really sit with it.
Yeah, because if you put yourself in the shoes of a young Nepali sent abroad, the reality is, it's often physically exhausting jobs. Grueling jobs. You are dealing with incredibly lonely lives, separated from your family for years at a time, often, navigating really unstable and precarious immigration conditions.
And all of this is endured just to earn enough to send remittances back home.
Just to keep the lights on.
Exactly. But those remittances, they represent this fascinating economic trap.
How so? Break down that trap for us.
Well, the money wired home is the lifeblood, right? It pays for basic needs, education, healthcare for millions of families.
Right. It keeps the country afloat.
It keeps the national economy breathing, but it also keeps the nation completely dependent. It basically turns Nepal into a consumer nation.
Ah, I see what you mean.
Because the country uses the money sent back by its laborers to buy goods produced elsewhere, rather than, functioning as a producer nation that generates its own wealth internally.
Right. It's like an extractive model.
That's a great way to put it.
Think about it like a country strip mining its own ambition.
Yeah.
You take the most vital, energetic resource you have, your youth, their drive, their potential, and you just ship it overseas.
You box it up and send it away.
Exactly. And the host country, they get the new highways, they get the climate-controlled stadiums, all that compounding economic output.
And Nepal gets a Western Union transfer.
Exactly. It sustains life, but it absolutely prevents growth.
But the author, and this is where it gets interesting, he identifies a massive hidden opportunity within this really painful narrative.
Okay, what's the opportunity? Because it sounds pretty dire so far.
Well, think about it. When millions of people leave their home country, they don't just check their brains at the border and offer only physical labor.
Right, they're living there. They're experiencing a new world.
Exactly. They are immersed in entirely new, hyper-modern environments. They acquire profound ambition, global exposure, advanced technical skills.
International networks.
Yes. Networks, and eventually capital.
So if I'm understanding the logic here, this brain drain that everyone laments is secretly incubating a future brain gain.
That is the foundational premise of this entire document.
Wow.
The human capital hasn't vanished. It is essentially, attending a global finishing school.
That's a really optimistic way to look at it.
It is, but the critical caveat here is that this human capital can only be recaptured if there is a vehicle worth returning to.
A vehicle, meaning like a company or an industry.
Right. And returning doesn't necessarily mean buying a plane ticket home and physically moving back.
Okay.
It means finding an economic and emotional vehicle that warrants their financial investment, their time, and all that expertise they've acquired abroad.
They need a compelling reason to direct all that incubated potential back toward Kathmandu.
Exactly. And that vehicle is Himalayan Compute.
Right. The pitch?
The author pitches it as a world-class tech infrastructure company designed from the ground up to be a magnet for elite talent.
And to drive home how transformational this could be, the text leans on a historical parallel that I found really fascinating.
The Estonia one.
Yeah. It compares what Himalayan Compute could be for Nepal to what Skype was for Estonia.
It's a really apt comparison.
Now, for anyone listening to this deep dive who isn't a telecom historian, why is Estonia the gold standard for this kind of national pivot?
Well, if you rewind to Estonia in the early 1990s, they had just emerged from the collapse of the Soviet Union, right?
Brand new independence.
Yeah. They had a tiny population, almost zero modern infrastructure, very few natural resources, and absolutely no global economic clout.
They were starting from scratch.
Basically, yeah. But Estonia made this conscious, radical choice to embrace a digital vision. They leaned heavily on their tech-savvy diaspora network.
Okay.
And when Skype was born there a decade later, it didn't just make the founders rich. It fundamentally altered the psychological trajectory of the entire nation.
Because Skype wasn't just a piece of software that let you, call your grandmother for free over the internet.
No, it was a flare shot into the night sky.
I love that, a flare.
It was a global proof of concept. It signaled to venture capitalists in Silicon Valley and London that a small, historically overlooked country could actually engineer world-class, globally disruptive technology.
Yeah, put them on the map.
Exactly. It brought immense foreign capital into the region, inspired a whole generation of local Estonian founders, and proved the nation's capability on the world stage.
And the author is positing that Himalayan Compute can be Nepal's Skype moment.
Yes.
It can serve as the undeniable proof that Nepal is open for high-tech, high-stakes, global business.
That's the dream.
But, to build that kind of national engine, the author lays down a fundamental, almost sacred pledge in the business plan. And I want to highlight this because it kind of anchors the entire financial strategy.
Well, well-pretensioned part.
Yeah. The text says all money made by the company in Nepal will be kept inside Nepal.
Which is the core operating principle, separating this from just a standard corporate expansion.
Right. But let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Sure.
When you tell international investors, hey, we're keeping all the money in the country, my immediate reaction is confusion.
Sure.
Like, is this a nonprofit charity initiative? Because global investors usually want to know the exact mechanism for getting their money out of an emerging market, right? Not how it's going to be permanently locked in.
I know, it sounds completely counterintuitive to traditional venture capital.
Completely backwards.
But the text is very explicit about this. This is not charity. It is a calculated strategy to fix a specific macroeconomic flaw.
Okay, walk me through that.
You have to understand the historical context of capital in Nepal. The author argues that Nepal has suffered from severe economic leakage for decades. Yeah. Take tourism, for example. It's a major industry there. Tourists flock to see the Himalayas, obviously.
Right, Mount Everest, trekking, all of that.
But if the luxury hotels are owned by foreign conglomerates and the booking platforms take a 20% cut back to Europe or the U.S.
Oh, I see.
And the tour agencies are internationally owned, a massive percentage of that revenue never actually touches the local economy.
It just immediately leaks out.
Exactly. The wealth is generated on Nepali soil, using Nepali natural beauty, but the profits compound in foreign bank accounts.
That makes a lot of sense. And I imagine the same thing happens when, foreign contractors are hired to build local infrastructure, right? Like dams or highways.
Oh, 100%. The international aid money flows in and then immediately flows right back out to construction firms in, other countries.
Right. So Himalayan Compute is designed to be the antidote to that specific leakage.
That is the goal. The strategy is to build a national engine of retained wealth.
Retained wealth.
Yeah, by ensuring the profits generated by this AI infrastructure remain within the domestic ecosystem, the company isn't just generating a quarterly dividend for some guy in New York.
Right.
It is building a foundational economic pillar that continually reinvests in the nation's own technological growth.
Okay, but building a multinational wealth-retaining engine for the AI era that requires a very specific corporate DNA, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And the text dives deep into the culture and structure required for this, and it is ruthless about what it cannot be.
Very ruthless.
It says, point blank, this company cannot operate on favoritism. It cannot run on caste dynamics, political connections, or the classic who-you-know nepotism that often throttles local economies.
It demands a strict, uncompromising meritocracy.
Which is easier said than done.
Oh, for sure. But the vision is to attract elite talent, not just from the Nepali diaspora, but from India, the United States, Europe, the Gulf, and East Asia.
Because to build an institution capable of competing with global tech giants, you need world-class minds, regardless of the passport they hold.
Exactly. But the text also points out that Nepal has a unique competitive advantage here, one that a massive firm in London or New York simply cannot buy.
Right, the local knowledge.
Yes, it's a deep, nuanced understanding of Nepal's ground realities.
Because if you are building physical infrastructure, navigating the local bureaucracy, understanding the cultural nuances of land acquisition, and working with regional labor, that local knowledge carries a massive premium.
You can't just import that kind of knowledge. It's the marriage of local operational mastery with global strategic thinking.
Which brings us to the origin story of the project itself.
Yeah, this is an important detail.
The text gives explicit credit to an individual named Pukar Hamal. It describes him as the spark and the first imagination behind the idea.
Right. He represents the genesis of the concept, and the author insists he deserves a prominent seat at the table.
That makes total sense, honoring the origin of the idea.
Definitely.
But then the author makes this seemingly contradictory pivot.
Oh, the CEO location.
Yes. He essentially states that a spark doesn't build a factory, and a spark doesn't secure hundreds of millions in funding.
Harsh, but true in the startup world.
Right. So the author positions themselves as the founder and CEO and makes a very specific point of stating they are moving to San Francisco to run this operation.
Yep.
Which, wait, if the entire emotional and strategic core of this project is about keeping wealth in Nepal and building a sovereign Nepali asset, why on earth does the CEO need to sit in an office in California?
It sounds hypocritical at first, right?
It really does. It sounds like they're immediately breaking their own rule.
But the answer lies in what the author calls the emotional infrastructure of the global tech industry.
Emotional infrastructure.
Yeah. You can have the most brilliant architectural blueprint in the world and access to the cheapest, most abundant hydropower in the Himalayas. But if you want to raise the kind of capital required to build global AI infrastructure...
We're talking hundreds of millions, right?
Easily. If you want that money, you have to position yourself where the capital feels psychologically safe.
You have to speak the language of Silicon Valley.
Exactly.
Oh.
San Francisco offers structural advantages you simply cannot replicate in Kathmandu right now.
Like what, specifically?
Well, it provides proximity to the deepest pools of venture capital on the planet. It offers the credibility of United States legal and financial incorporation structures.
Right, like setting up a Delaware C Corp.
Exactly. Investors demand that. It grants access to the New York capital markets, and it creates a pipeline to the world's top university talent.
So it's about friction reduction.
Exactly. Friction reduction.
If I'm an institutional investor, I am inherently risk-averse when it comes to unfamiliar legal jurisdictions.
Right. You don't want to wire $50 million into a legal system you don't understand.
So by placing the leadership in San Francisco, you are basically wrapping this highly ambitious emerging market infrastructure project in the familiar, trusted legal and financial architecture of the United States.
That's precisely it. And as the text points out, this is standard operating procedure for major global players.
Is it?
Oh, yeah. Look at the biggest conglomerates in the developing world, Ambani and Adani in India, the massive tech initiatives out of the Gulf states, the Chinese tech giants.
Okay, I see.
They maintain absolute operational dominance locally, but their financial and strategic minds think and often reside globally.
They operate locally, but they capitalize globally.
Well put.
So once the vision and the leadership structure are set, the immediate hurdle is actual capital.
Right. You need money to start.
The blueprint outlines a mobilization of what it calls the First Army. And that's the Nepali diaspora.
Specifically, the target for the initial fundraising is the Nepali diaspora residing in the United States.
Now, why specifically target them first? Why not go straight to a traditional VC firm on Sand Hill Road?
Well, the author breaks down the unique profile of the U.S.-based diaspora, and it forms this incredibly potent combination.
Let's hear it.
First, they possess relatively high disposable income compared to the domestic population.
Makes sense.
Second, they have a deep emotional attachment to their homeland, coupled with, a profound frustration regarding its ongoing economic stagnation.
They want to see it succeed.
Right. Third, simply by living and working in the U.S., often in the tech sector, they have increasing exposure to startup culture and risk-based investing.
Oh, that's a good point. They understand equity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And finally, they have rich, interconnected networks.
Because if you can't convince your own diaspora, the people who actually understand the ground reality and have the emotional incentive to see it succeed.
If they won't back it.
Right. If they won't back it, a clinical, numbers-driven VC in Silicon Valley will literally laugh you out of the room.
Oh, 100%. The diaspora serves as the ultimate proof of concept for the broader capital markets.
It's social proof.
Yes. If the people who know the country best are willing to risk their own money, it signals to outside investors that the risk is calculable and the upside is real.
Here's where the actual mechanics of how they plan to raise this money gets really interesting.
The bundler model.
Yes, because they aren't just setting up like a generic GoFundMe page and hoping for the best.
No, this is highly orchestrated.
The author outlines this highly structured bundler model. So you have a lead fundraiser coordinating the big picture, but the real engine is the bundlers.
Right.
Let's invent a persona here to make this concrete for you listening.
Okay.
Imagine you are a senior software engineer living in Dallas.
Sure.
You don't have $5 million to invest yourself, obviously, but you are well connected. You know 10 successful doctors, a few tech executives, and some local business owners who are all from Nepal and want to invest back home.
Classic diaspora network.
Exactly. If you go to them and bundle their investments together, and you raise at least $100,000 for the company, you are incentivized with 10% of what you raise paid out in company shares.
It is a brilliant application of incentive alignment.
It really is.
The text explicitly states that this is not a charity drive. It is a hardcore startup campaign.
Right.
By offering that 10% equity incentive, you instantly transform passive supporters. People who might just share a post on social media and wish you well.
The good luck crowd.
Exactly. You turn them into a highly motivated, active sales force. You are turning the diaspora into a distributed, financially incentivized network of capital raisers.
It reminds me of high-level political fundraising.
Oh, very much so.
You leverage the social capital of influential people and reward them for leveraging their networks.
Yep.
But, okay, let's look at the administrative reality of this.
The cap table issue.
Yes, the cap table. Because if you have this bundler army successfully recruiting hundreds of different people, some throwing in 10 grand, some giving 50 grand, how do you actually manage that?
It's a logistical nightmare if you do it wrong.
Exactly. If I'm building a startup, I do not want 500 individual names on my ownership structure. That sounds like complete chaos.
It would be administratively paralyzing.
Right.
In the startup world, your capitalization table, your cap table, is basically the ledger of who owns what.
Okay.
If you have 500 different individuals investing directly into a nascent Nepali infrastructure startup, your cap table becomes a mess.
Because you have to deal with all of them.
Every single time.
Yeah.
Every time you need a shareholder vote to approve a major decision or a signature for a future funding round, you have to track down 500 people across different time zones.
Oh man, that sounds terrible.
It is. And institutional investors despise messy cap tables. It is frequently a deal breaker for future funding. They just walk away.
So mechanically, how do they solve this cap table problem while still taking the diaspora's money? Because they need the money.
They filter everything through a U.S.-based limited liability company, an LLC.
Okay, an LLC.
Right. The individual diaspora members do not buy shares directly in Himalayan Compute.
Ah.
They buy shares in this specific LLC, and then the LLC, functioning as a single legal entity, pools all that money and makes one massive investment into the startup.
That is so smart.
Right. So when a major Silicon Valley VC looks at the startup's cap table later on, they don't see 500 scattered names. They see exactly one line item. the diaspora LLC.
That is incredibly clean.
Very clean.
And they set a minimum investment threshold of $10,000 for anyone wanting to join this LLC.
Yeah, that $10,000 floor serves a dual purpose.
What's the dual purpose?
Well, first, it democratizes ownership,
Yeah.
meaning it is accessible to that successful engineer or doctor in Dallas who wants to participate but isn't a multimillionaire.
Right, it's attainable.
But simultaneously, it is a high enough barrier to ensure the investors are actually serious.
It's not just lunch money.
Exactly. It filters out the casual noise. It reduces the administrative burden of dealing with thousands of tiny, $500 checks.
Right.
And it gives the diaspora a powerful, unified single voice as a major shareholder.
Because they're all voting as one block through the LLC.
Exactly.
Okay, so pooling the diaspora's money solves the ownership problem, but that brings up a much trickier issue. Valuation.
The math gets a little complicated here.
It does. When this unified LLC writes that first check, how much of the company are they actually buying? Because the math proposed in the text looks completely backwards at first glance.
It really does.
The target is to raise $5 million at a $50 million valuation.
Right.
Now, standard startup math dictates that if a company is worth $50 million and I give you $5 million, I should own 10% of that company.
That's just basic division.
Exactly. But the blueprint states this $5 million will only buy 3% of the equity.
Yep.
Help me understand why any investor would willingly accept losing 7% of their expected ownership right out of the gate. That sounds awful.
I know it seems like a glaring mathematical error or just a really terrible deal on the surface.
Right.
But it is actually a highly sophisticated venture capital maneuver. That missing 7% is the cost of what the author calls an anti-dilution clause.
Anti-dilution clause.
Okay.
Okay, let's break down the mechanics of dilution for the listener because it's kind of the silent killer of early startup investments. How does dilution actually happen?
Okay, let's use a pizza analogy.
Love a pizza analogy.
Think of a company's total value like a pizza cut into 10 slices.
Okay.
If you buy one slice, you own 10% of the company. Simple enough.
Right.
But let's say 2 years from now, the company needs a massive influx of cash to build a new data center.
They need $1 billion.
Right. So they go to a Gulf Sovereign Wealth Fund, and in exchange for $1 billion, the company decides to bake 10 entirely new pizzas and give them to the fund. Your original single slice didn't disappear. You still have it.
But there are way more slices now.
Exactly. Because there are now 110 total slices in existence, your percentage of ownership just shrank from 10% to less than 1%.
My slice basically became a crumb relative to the whole pie.
Exactly. You have been diluted.
Okay, so how does the clause fix this?
An anti-dilution clause is a legal lock that protects against exactly that scenario.
A lock.
It is a contractual guarantee that forces the company to issue you extra shares for free in the future.
Oh.
Yeah. It ensures your total percentage of the company never shrinks below a certain threshold, regardless of how many new shares they issue to later investors.
So by giving up that 7% upfront, taking 3% instead of 10%, these early diaspora investors are essentially buying premium insurance.
Exactly. They are sacrificing immediate equity for long-term downside protection.
That makes a lot of sense. When the company inevitably goes out to raise hundreds of millions of dollars later, these early backers won't get washed out.
Right. They aren't just buying shares. They are buying a fortified, unshakable position on the cap table.
Okay, that clarifies the math. But that brings us to the psychology of the valuation itself.
The 50 million number.
Yeah. Why demand a $50 million valuation from day one when the company is essentially just, a brilliant business plan, a manifesto, and a vision?
It's a massive number for day one.
Because if I walk into a bank with a piece of paper and say my idea is worth $50 million, they'd show me the door.
They'd laugh at you. But building global AI infrastructure is one of the most capital-intensive endeavors on Earth.
It's not cheap.
It's astronomically expensive. You aren't just paying salaries for a few coders in a coffee shop.
Right.
You are buying massive tracts of land, you're pouring specialized concrete, laying industrial cooling systems.
And the GPUs.
Oh, acquiring thousands of hyper-expensive GPUs, graphics processing units. You're going to need hundreds of millions of dollars.
So you need a massive runway.
Yes. And if you go to the market with a weak, timid initial fundraising round, say, raising $500,000 at a $2 million valuation,
you look small.
you signal weakness to every future institutional investor. You look like a small-time amateur operation that isn't ready for the big leagues.
You have to act like a heavyweight if you want to fight in the heavyweight division.
Exactly. This first round isn't just about securing $5 million to pay for legal fees and feasibility studies.
It's about setting the stage.
It is about crafting an undeniable narrative of strength. It sets the baseline.
Right.
If you can convince your own diaspora that this idea is inherently worth $50 million on day one, you establish a powerful floor for all future negotiations with larger funds.
But to justify that $50 million swagger, you have to look the part immediately.
You just be one guy with a laptop.
No. And the text is adamant about establishing a massive executive structure right from the jump.
Day one.
The author explicitly warns against the common startup advice of, hiring slowly.
They want the whole C-suite instantly.
Yeah. They want a founder CEO, a chief financial officer, a chief technology officer, a chief infrastructure officer, an in-house legal counsel, a head of government relations, and a head of global partnerships.
All on day one.
All on day one. That is a staggering payroll burn rate for a company that hasn't plugged in a single server yet.
It is a massive upfront cost, but it is the required cost of entry for this specific arena.
Why? Why do you need all those people immediately?
Because Himalayan Compute is entering a geopolitically sensitive, highly regulated, infrastructure-heavy industry.
Okay.
You cannot negotiate a power purchase agreement, which is this complex legal contract securing gigawatts of electricity from a national government with a skeletal team.
Right. Can't have an intern doing that.
No. And you cannot navigate cross-border data privacy treaties without a seasoned head of government relations and a top-tier legal counsel.
It goes back to the idea that VCs and sovereign wealth funds do not invest in what a company is today.
No, they don't.
They invest in what the governance structure proves the company is capable of executing tomorrow.
Precisely. If you don't have the adults in the room to negotiate the geopolitical red tape, the vision is dead on arrival.
And that philosophy extends directly to how they plan to structure their global board, right?
Yeah, the board structure is fascinating.
The text is highly specific about who gets a seat, and more importantly, who does not.
No vanity boards.
Exactly. It explicitly rejects the idea of seeking political legitimacy, celebrity legitimacy, or superficial nationalist legitimacy.
They don't want famous Nepali actors.
Or retired politicians.
Or local influencers holding board seats just for the optics.
So who do they want?
They want hardcore operators, diaspora leaders, serious technocrats, global AI and cloud advisors, and power grid experts.
Because institutional investors can spot a ceremonial vanity board from a mile away.
Instantly. When a sovereign wealth fund considers wiring $100 million, they really don't care if a beloved local celebrity is endorsing the project on Instagram.
Right, they care about risk mitigation.
Yes. They look at the board to see if the company is overseen by deep technical experts, people who actually understand the thermal dynamics of cooling a data center or the geopolitical nuances of global bandwidth routing.
A highly technical board is a signal of institutional legitimacy.
Completely.
Okay, so all of this setup, the C-suite, the board, the LLC, it all leads to a frantic timeline.
The first 12 months.
Yeah. The author mandates that the first 12 months must be treated like a war.
Like a war.
It is a total sprint. The team must finalize complex legal structures across the U.S. and Nepal, close the $5 million diaspora round, secure physical land.
Verify the power grid.
Right. Verify the feasibility of drawing massive power from the grid, navigate the initial government approvals, and have a pilot site planned.
It's exhausting just listing it.
It really is. If they fail to move at warp speed, what is the actual risk here? Why the rush?
Because in the technology sector, momentum is oxygen.
Momentum is oxygen.
If you spend 3 years carefully dotting I's and crossing dashes just to get the initial paperwork done, the technological landscape shifts underneath you.
Right. AI moves incredibly fast.
The capital markets might cool down, competitor nations might build their own infrastructure, and the window of opportunity just slams shut.
As the text states beautifully, startups are built on speed, not spreadsheets.
Exactly. The faster you execute that chaotic first year, the more undeniable the momentum becomes to the outside world.
And they're going to need the outside world's attention because that first $5 million, it's just the appetizer.
Oh, tiny appetizer.
Once the structure is built and the pilot is ready, the blueprint outlines a massive pivot. Rounds 2 and 3 of fundraising will require tens, hundreds, and eventually billions of dollars.
Billions. With a B.
Yes. And this is where the strategy takes a fascinating, almost audacious geopolitical turn. The author sets their sights squarely on Gulf sovereign wealth funds.
This is perhaps the most compelling strategic narrative in the entire document.
I think so too. The author outlines a specific pitching strategy for these Gulf funds, framing it under the concept of payback time.
Payback time.
Yeah. And the logic here loops back perfectly to the history of labor migration we discussed at the very beginning of the deep dive.
Right, the construction labor.
For decades, the explosive, miraculous modernization of the Gulf states, the incredible six-lane highways, the towering skyscrapers in Dubai and Doha,
The luxury malls.
the massive international airports, the World Cup stadiums. A staggering percentage of that physical world was built on the backs of cheap Nepali labor.
It's undeniable. The host nations in the Middle East benefited immensely from that imported human capital.
They built generational wealth.
They built generational wealth and world-class infrastructure, while Nepal received vital yet ultimately fleeting remittances. They failed to generate compounding wealth creation within their own borders.
So the pitch to the sovereign wealth funds is essentially, you owe us, we built your world, now it's time to help fund ours.
That's the emotional core of it.
But let me push back on this, because it sounds incredibly naive.
How so?
Well, we are talking about sovereign wealth funds. These are some of the most ruthless, clinically unsentimental pools of capital on the planet.
They're very calculated.
They manage hundreds of billions of dollars. If you are listening to this and wondering why a sovereign wealth fund cares about Nepal's history, put yourself in their shoes. Are they really going to write $1 billion check out of historical guilt?
Absolutely not. And the author is actually clear-eyed about this reality.
Okay, good.
He states explicitly that sovereign wealth funds do not invest in countries, and they absolutely do not invest in guilt or charity.
They invest in returns.
Yes. They are mandated to find massive, scalable upside to grow their nation's wealth for a post-oil future.
So why use the payback time narrative at all if the investors only care about the math? It seems counterproductive.
Because in high-stakes global finance, a powerful narrative provides leverage.
Leverage.
The historical labor dynamic isn't being used as a plea for charity. It is a strategic entry point. It gets you a meeting.
It gets you in the room with the decision makers. It fundamentally alters the psychological dynamic of the negotiation.
How so?
Well, you aren't walking into their offices in Riyadh or Abu Dhabi as a struggling developing nation begging for a foreign aid grant.
Right.
You are walking in as an equal partner, offering them a world-class AI infrastructure investment opportunity, while subtly reminding them of the deeply intertwined economic history between the two regions.
It reframes the relationship from past exploitation to future, high-tech, mutual profit.
It is geopolitical jujitsu.
I love that. Geopolitical jujitsu. You take the heavy weight of that historical imbalance and you just use it to flip the dynamic in your favor.
Exactly.
And when you combine that narrative with the actual physical assets Nepal brings to the table, the pitch moves from emotional to strictly logical.
Right, because Nepal actually has what they need.
Yes. Let's talk about the physics of AI, because this is the crux of why Nepal matters in this equation. AI compute requires staggering amounts of electricity.
Oh, it's unbelievable how much power it draws. The global AI arms race currently has one major bottleneck. It isn't a lack of brilliant software engineers.
And increasingly, it isn't even a lack of microchips.
Right. It is a lack of raw electricity. Training massive AI models requires running tens of thousands of GPUs simultaneously.
Which draws immense power.
And generates massive heat, which then requires even more power just for cooling.
And this is where Nepal's geography becomes its greatest asset.
The Himalayas.
Nepal has the potential to generate vast amounts of clean, renewable energy through hydropower, thanks to the Himalayas and its river systems.
Right. So if you can marry Gulf capital, which is desperately looking for higher return AI investments, with Nepali renewable hydropower to fuel the AI revolution, you have a globally competitive value proposition.
It's a perfect match. The Gulf has the money, but they operate in extremely hot climates where cooling data centers is incredibly energy intensive.
Yeah, you don't want to cool a server farm in the desert if you don't have to.
No. Nepal has the cool climate and a potential for massive, cheap, green electricity.
But the ultimate product being built here isn't just, a big warehouse with some servers stacked inside.
No, it's way bigger than that.
The text clarifies that Himalayan Compute aims to be a true AI infrastructure platform.
A platform.
For a layman, what does that actually look like in practice?
It means they aren't just renting out physical space for other companies to put their computers. They are providing the entire ecosystem.
Okay, an ecosystem.
They will offer cloud services, allowing startups across South Asia to build software on their network.
So they become the backbone.
Right. They will rent out massive GPU clusters for companies needing to train their own AI models.
Like an AWS for AI in South Asia.
Exactly. They will provide secure enterprise hosting for large corporations and become the raw compute engine for university research across the region.
So the vision is to be the foundational platform that exports AI compute capability to the entirety of South Asia.
Yes, which necessitates the dual headquarters strategy we touched on earlier.
Right, San Francisco and Kathmandu.
You marry the ambition, the venture capital network, and the Silicon Valley halo of the United States headquarters.
With the geographic, energetic, and strategic realities of the ground operations in Nepal.
It is like having the strategic brain operating in San Francisco, while the massive powerhouse heart beats in the Himalayas.
That's a great image. But, to ensure that heart keeps beating, you need more than just smart employees. You need true believers.
You need a movement.
Exactly. The final piece of the blueprint focuses on building a movement. Truly transformational companies often transcend the specific products or services they sell, don't they?
All the great ones do.
Think about Apple. For millions of people, it isn't just a phone or a laptop company.
It's a lifestyle, a design philosophy.
Exactly. Tesla isn't just an automotive manufacturer.
It is a belief system about the transition to sustainable energy.
And SpaceX is practically a national obsession regarding humanity's future in the stars.
Right. And the author brings this concept back to the regional context, noting how Infosys became the corporate proof for India's modernization.
Oh, that's a really good example.
It proved that Indian engineers could build global software behemoths.
And just like Skype became Estonia's symbol of digital rebirth.
Himalayan Compute aims to be that symbolic, undeniable proof for Nepal.
The goal is to build a company that fundamentally rewires the psychology of the diaspora.
That's the real endgame.
Imagine Nepali parents sitting at the dinner table in Dallas or London or Doha or Sydney.
Yeah.
Instead of telling their children that success means assimilating into someone else's economy,
they can point to this massive technological powerhouse and say, your future is being built right now back home, and we own a piece of it.
It shifts the entire mindset. It moves the diaspora from thinking we are just sending money home to keep the lights on
to realizing we're actively building the engine that will power the global future.
The text uses a phrase that perfectly encapsulates the magnitude of this shift.
A civilizational upgrade.
A civilizational upgrade.
Transitioning from a nation known primarily for exporting its raw human muscle to a nation that harnesses its unique natural geography and water resources to export high-level AI infrastructure.
It alters the economic gravity of the entire region.
It really does. It redefines a nation's place in the 21st century global order.
It is an incredibly bold blueprint. I mean, we've traced the journey from the tragic imbalance of the brain drain.
Explored the strategic brilliance of keeping wealth domestic.
We analyzed the necessity of colliding San Francisco capital with Himalayan hydropower.
Unpacked the ingenious bundler model and the mechanics of anti-dilution.
Recognized the sheer speed required in year one.
And finally, examined the geopolitical leverage of pitching Gulf sovereign wealth.
It is a comprehensive roadmap from dependence to absolute sovereignty in the AI age.
But, as we conclude this analysis, the blueprint leaves us with a fascinating, broader question that extends far beyond just one company or one nation's borders.
What's that?
If Nepal actually succeeds in this endeavor,
Yeah.
if they effectively leverage their massive hydropower and strategic geography to monopolize or dominate AI compute for the entire South Asian region.
Yeah.
How might this permanently shift the global balance of power?
Oh, wow.
We are moving into an era where artificial intelligence will dictate economic supremacy.
That's already happening, yeah.
If the historically overlooked labor-exporting nations of the global South suddenly control the raw compute power that the traditionally wealthy consumer nations of the West desperately need.
Do they eventually control the future?
Exactly.
That is exactly the kind of question that forces you to rethink how the world works.
It really does.
The invisible infrastructure of tomorrow might just be built in the very places we used to only look to for physical labor.
It is a total inversion of the geopolitical map.
It's mind-blowing. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. If you're listening, Keep questioning the systems around you, keep exploring the mechanics of the future, and we'll see you next time.